All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. So, after last night's loss for the Syracuse Orange, even one of their most famous alums is disgusted. Carmelo Anthony simply put SMFH under a Syracuse highlight on Instagram. We all know what that means. And Anthony feels, honestly, like plenty of other Orange backers do right now. Following the loss to North Carolina, Syracuse is now 13-10 on this college basketball season, while they are 4-6 within the ACC. The Cuse are staring at the possibility of missing the NCAA tournament for the fifth consecutive year. And you've got to go back more than 50 years to find the last time that this happened to this program. Now, former Syracuse guard Adrian Autry is now in his third year as the head coach at his alma mater. Autry has not done much to make the folks in Central New York, or make the folks in Central New York really, the best way to say is probably distinguish himself from the way that things ended under former head coach Jim Boeheim, and of course start his own legacy there. Because the last couple of years for Syracuse under Boeheim, as great as he was, were not great. And then of course Autry has not made things better. In Autry's first year at Syracuse, they won 20 games, didn't make the NCAA tournament. The future appeared to be bright. They went 11-9 in the ACC, and honestly, they've only gotten worse since then. The biggest thing for me when I watch Syracuse basketball is that this program lacks an identity. And when I think about Syracuse basketball for so many years, that was not the case. But they've lacked an identity for quite some time. When you think about Syracuse basketball, you think about their famous 2-3 zone. And of course, that was a staple under former head coach Jim Boeheim. There's only remnants of that zone right now under Adrian Autry. And I get it. The college basketball world has changed. These kids are not staying there as long as they once did, but it's one of those where because of that, it's tougher to implement a system, but you still have to adjust and adapt. But there's nothing that jumps off the page to say, you know what, Syracuse is still a force to be reckoned with, so to speak. It's one of those where I said it was a mistake at the time. I wrote about it, and I'm going to stick by it, and I'm going to say it like this. Syracuse chased the football money of the ACC, and in the process, they gave up their basketball soul. Now, I know once upon a time, Syracuse football rather, was a program that would usually be ranked in the top 20. Those days are long gone. Syracuse chased that football money. They really haven't had football success in the ACC either, but it has really, in my opinion, hindered their basketball program. You think about it, not to have revisionist history or nothing like that, but you think about the days when Syracuse was still in the Big East. We're talking about a team that was a perennial tournament team, a team that was more than likely to finish in the top 25 or be in the top 25 at some point that season. And they had an identity. You think about Syracuse under Jim Boeheim. He would, consistently send guys to the NBA. He would consistently make runs to the Sweet 16. I know it worked out for Syracuse ultimately in 2003 when they won a national championship. But nonetheless, you think about Syracuse under Boeheim. He got them to the Final Four in '87, got them there again in '96, 2003 when they won it. They got there in 2013, their last season in the Big East, and then they got there once more in 2016. But, at the end of the day, this program is just a shell of what it was. Okay. And honestly, I truly do feel that Syracuse basketball, like other programs, is simply a fish out of water in the ACC. You look at Syracuse basketball since they went to the ACC. They've only won at least 10 conference games 6 times. No ACC tournament championships. or no regular season championships in the ACC since going to Tobacco Road. When I think about Syracuse basketball, I think about the rivalries that made this program what it was. And you can't tell the story of the original Big East, okay, without talking about Syracuse Georgetown. Then, of course, the Syracuse Connecticut rivalry, the Syracuse St. John's rivalry. Of course, those things are, a thing of the past right now. We're never going to have a situation like it is for Connecticut, where Syracuse decided to do a peel back and go back to the Big East. That's not happening. A lot of hurt feelings on both sides. It just ain't happening. But nonetheless, Syracuse took the money, okay, from the ACC. But nonetheless, like I said before, they sacrificed their basketball soul to do it because they just stick out like a sore thumb, in my opinion, in the Atlantic Coast Conference. And at the end of the day, all Syracuse really has to do, because they're not the only ones. Just look at what Pitt and Boston College, two former Big East schools. What have they done since going to the Big East? Leaving the Big East for the ACC as well. BC used to compete basketball and football wise in the Big East. Now that they went to the ACC, they're basically there to collect a paycheck and take up a roster spot. 5 out of their last 6 years in the Big East, Boston College made the NCAA tournament. You look at Pitt. Pitt has only made the NCAA tournament 3 times in 12 years since going to the ACC, and it's about to be 13 years. Okay, so getting back to Syracuse, again, like I said, no identity, no rivalries, of course. And rivalries, for the most part, are dead in these mega conferences. But on top of that, recruiting has waned. It's one of those things, again, like I said, under Boeheim, they had a system. He was able to recruit certain type players. He typically had a big center, not necessarily somebody who could score, but somebody who could clog up the middle, play defense, rebound, and block shots. You had your wings, which were the strength of that 2-3. And then on top of that, Boeheim always had himself a solid point guard. Adrian Autry was one of those guys. Syracuse lacks all of that right now. It's one of those, for me. They're not getting the recruits outside of Carmelo Anthony's son, Keon. When was the last time that we saw a high-profile high school basketball player want to go to Central New York and play for Syracuse? And even when Syracuse didn't get high-profile recruits, Boeheim, like I said, still got guys that fit his system, and he still was sending occasional guys to the NBA. Now, one thing about Jim Boeheim, I'll say this. He was prophetic when initially asked about Syracuse leaving the Big East for the ACC, and he famously said, ask me about it in 10 years. He felt that it was basically greed. And of course, he got muzzled, if you will, by the school president about that, because naughty, naughty, don't say anything bad about it. But this ACC thing with Syracuse, I got news for you folks. It's not working. Okay. And Syracuse is not the only program that I feel that way. And honestly, not even say feeling that way. Honestly, the proof is in the pudding. It's not working. Okay. Maybe now, don't get me wrong. Getting back to Boeheim, maybe the game did pass him by. Okay. I understand that. But this program right now is no better with Adrian Autry in charge. You're talking about a guy, he's 47 and 41 so far as Syracuse's head coach, 22 and 28 in league play. And to give you an idea about that, Syracuse is on pace to lose at least 10 conference games for the 4th time in the last 5 years. You know how many times Syracuse had double-digit conference losses basketball-wise when they were in the Big East? 0. Okay, so it's one of those where, again, like I said, they are just simply a fish out of water. And of course, as the losses continue to pile up for Syracuse, it's one of those where people are going to ask, is Adrian Autry the right guy to lead this program? And I think if this trend continues, and if Syracuse fails to make the NCAA tournament, if Syracuse fails to finish this season with a winning record, I think that there are going to be some folks that are going to say, as much as they loved Adrian Autry as a basketball player, during his time at Syracuse, maybe it's time for somebody else to lead this program. People are going to possibly look at Jerry McNamara, another Syracuse legend who is having success right now with Siena. Or is it time for Syracuse to maybe go outside of their program to find their next head coach? I think about Connecticut. Granted, the situation is a little bit different. But, Kevin Ollie had initial success replacing Jim Calhoun, his former head coach at UConn. Got Connecticut to a national championship. Wasn't working out for him. He kind of was lost in the shuffle when UConn was in the American. But eventually, Connecticut went outside of their family and they found success in Danny Hurley. Maybe it's time for Syracuse to possibly go outside of their family to go out there and find success. It's one of those where, don't get me wrong, Syracuse still has the potential under the right person to compete in the ACC. But the ACC is always going to be a Duke and North Carolina thing as long as they were there, as long as they are there, excuse me. Nonetheless, Syracuse is just going to continue to be a fish out of water. But nonetheless, they need somebody who is going to help them compete in that league. And they still have not figured it out. You look at this season for Syracuse. I think it was very telling early on. They lost 3 games, 3 consecutive games to Big 12 opponents. They came back and beat Tennessee out of the SEC. Big win for them. But then you turn around later that month and lose to Hofstra. They lost their first conference game to Clemson, albeit Clemson has been a perennial NCAA tournament team, and then losing 5 out of their last 6. And of course, it started with an overtime loss to Boston College. It continued with a home loss to Virginia Tech, and it's like pick your poison as far as which loss was worse than the previous one. But nonetheless, this is the current state of Syracuse basketball. It's one of those for me, like I said, in the right hands, this thing can be successful because there's tradition there, okay, for Syracuse. But nonetheless, like I said, they are still fighting an uphill battle in the ACC, especially if they don't have the right leadership. I cannot say this enough. Please forgive me for sounding like a broken record. Syracuse chased the football money and in the process broke up the original Big East. And also, like I said, they sacrificed their soul. Syracuse basketball had an identity in the Big East. They benefited from the rivalries they had. They benefited from playing in Madison Square Garden. They benefited from that region because they were able to get a lot of the local kids from the New York and New England area and the Philadelphia and the DC area to come play ball for them. No longer the case for this thing. And the bottom line is Syracuse right now is simply a rudderless ship. I don't see this season finishing on a positive note for the Orange. They've got a tough game this Saturday on the road against Virginia. They still got to travel to Duke. They still got the rematch with North Carolina. They've still got a game on the road against Louisville. So I'm looking at this thing right now. When the ACC tournament rolls around, if Syracuse is 500 within the league, I think that would be a shock. Okay, and like I said, 3 out of the last 4 years have seen them finish with a losing record within the ACC. I think this is going to be the 4th one. And if it is the 4th one, if they don't even qualify for the ACC tournament or if they're one and done in the ACC tournament, I think this program, I think this school would be ready to move on from Adrian Autry. This is not the Syracuse program that I fondly remember. It's not the Syracuse program that I grew up watching, okay, because that Syracuse program, like I said, had an identity. They were a consistent NCAA tournament team. They were a consistent top 20 team. They had a consistent program. This Syracuse team is simply lost in the shuffle in the Atlantic Coast Conference. And I got news for you. At this rate, it's not getting better anytime soon. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw in this podcast, you know what to do. Just hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. And like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. Also, if you are on the X, formerly known as Twitter, You can check me out anytime at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you give me that follow, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. That also goes for Instagram, and you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, if you're on Facebook, definitely check out the Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports groups going on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off. And I'm saying thanks once again for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.